In this video, I'm going to review the 1937 Tobin aerial photograph of Comanche Peak, as well as a 1964 aerial of the area south of Comanche Peak that's kind of today's Steiner Ranch River Place. That area has Panther Hollow and Santa Monica Springs. Santa Monica Springs is said to have been a Comanche camping spot and is at a ford on the Colorado that would have led down to today's BK Road. Also, I'll be talking a little bit about the Preece family. Dick Preece and William Martin Preece were Texas Rangers before the Civil War and then ranched in this area later. They have some of the earliest patents. But anyway, there are connections between the Preeces and the Comanche Trail. I'll touch on some of that. Before getting to the 1937 aerial, I want to talk a little bit about Old Burnett Road, as I think it helps set the context for Comanche Peak. So this triangle here is where Comanche Peak is located. So there was back in the 1877. In fact, here there's a link up here. I've written a blog. If you want to click on this, it will take you to an article, a short blog I've written on the relationship between Old Burnett Road and Comanche Peak. But for quick orientation, I put a couple of points on here, and I'm going to zoom out. What today is 2222 to 4 points, and then straight ahead Bullock Hollow to Anderson Mill, Valente. There's a section of Old Burnett Road that emerges out of the water, out of the lake here, used to cross here, and then turning into 1431, and then on to Fort Croghan, Burnett. This is the old maps. For example, Travis County maps in 1877, surveyed in 77, show this as the Old Burnett Road. And Comanche Peak sets on that old road. So it would have been the connection for traffic coming from Burnett down the river valley this way. It's the connection to Mount Manel. And again, just click on this link here and there's a little more on that. I just say that to keep in mind, to provide some context for talking about the 1937 aerial, or Comanche Peak in general. Okay, so here we have Comanche Peak, and I've turned on the overlay for the 1937 Tobin aerial. So just a quick look around here, and I've got exaggerated elevations a bit here. Here's Defeat Hollow. Here's Horseshoe Bend. So you'll notice, for example, on Horseshoe Bend, as it was, this is 37, so the lake had not been filled in. The lake was not there yet. So you'll notice there are, and I wish we had more over here, but it looks like there are farming pastures down in this area. Defeat Hollow. So Defeat Hollow, again, is where Joel Harris ran into the Indians. And the date is based on deed records, and what I know about Joel Harris was circa 1870. More on that, not here, but in when I do a write-up on this. So you recall I was pointing out Old Burnett Road. So in 37, you can see here, here's Old Burnett Road coming this way. This is 4 points. So this is 4 points right here. And you can see this stretch here now is called Bullock Hollow. Used to be part of the Burnett Road, Old Burnett Road, I'm going to call it. This is today's 2222, and this stretch has gone variously under names of Bull Creek Road and Burnett Road. So you see the road basically came this way straight through. So one thing that really stands out, and as part of the reason I wanted to look at the 37 aerial, was to see what the state of Comanche Trail looked like in 1937. So this is Comanche Trail in 1937. And as you can see, and I'm stopping here, this basically is the boundary for the Travis County lot. So we got the oasis over in this area now. But if we pull this off, you can see what it looks like today. This is the road we call Comanche Trail today. It's been straightened out a little bit. And I'm going to talk about some of these areas right in here. This is the oasis. One of the first things I want to point out that's interesting when you look at the Comanche Peak in 3D in Google Earth, and if we once we strip away the houses that are out there now and the oasis, is that it's a kind of a classic mesa. So historically, we have a number of mesas that the Comanches are tied to. The other Comanche Peak in Hood County that most people associate with the name Comanche Peak is a mesa of about this size. The Santa Ana Mountains in Santa Ana, Texas were a traditional location for the Comanche, and named after the Comanche chief Santa Ana. And Pilot Knob in Williamson County, also known as Mount Gabriel, which is the highest point in Williamson County. That's the location from which the Comanches spotted the Webster Party, their wagon train, which led to the massacre near current Leander. They're all mesa-shaped things. So although the name is Comanche Peak, at least when I think of a peak, I think of like a mountainous kind of thing. And indeed, the Comanche were associated with conical types of mountains. And in fact, in the write-up of Dolly Webster, she says that as they traveled, the Indians would frequently climb, various hills to do a reconnaissance. So the thing about a high point is it's good for observing, and it's good for also being seen, as in signal fires. It's also a very defensible spot. The fact that it's a mesa means that more than one or two people can be at the top. I'm going to start this animation to kind of give you an idea. And here in this animation here, we're seeing Comanche Peak on the topos, but also here's the trail, what we call Comanche Trail to the top. I'm going to run that again. I've pulled off the 1937, so you can kind of see what it looks like today. Again, here's Comanche Trail today running this way, the peak. We've got the oasis, and then we have high dollar real estate being built over here. So let me point out some things that just kind of jump out at me when I look at this. Of course, I'm going to leave that. Here's the peak. There's the boundary for the Travis County property. Here's the old Comanche Trail. One thing you'll notice down here is the connection. Notice this is the new FM Ranch to Market 620. But back in the day, and when you go look at the 1896 topos, the old road didn't run up to 4 points. It basically did this kind of thing. So this is 2222 over here. So today, this has been completely obliterated. So in today's travel, you come to kind of a jog, slight jog in the road, and it goes on up to 4 points, and then you hang a left or right. But back in the old day, this section, according to the topos from 1896, this section was gone, and this is the new 620, of course. So you can see there is a continuous connection here between Comanche Trail coming off this way and then hooking up with the old road. So one of the things that's inside the Balcones Canyonland Preserve is when you look for houses out in this area, there's not a lot. I mean, the trail is barely, well, the trail is just that, it's a trail. But there is a house right in here, just off the trail. And if we pull the map off, this is what it looks like today. So the house looks like it was right in this area. And you'll notice down here there is a pasture or something. I can't tell if there's another structure down here or not, but you'll notice also that there is a trail that looks like it runs down there. And again, if I pull off the map, you can see that today we still have that disturbed area. So house is in here somewhere, a pasture or something, and there is a trail that connected the two. This disturbed area right here, very close to what the topo maps show as the top of Comanche Peak, and you notice it's right on the edge. So if you were, who knows, if you were camping, I don't know. And if we pull off today's, this disturbed area is still there. And just in general, if you look at the top, in addition to what we call Comanche Trail today, there are just various other trails. So I've turned on just a few, but if you start looking at the photograph, you can see that there are various, there are disturbed areas on the top where there's no growth. I wouldn't think there would be any farming. I mean, like this is probably some kind of pasture area, but there are areas up here that look like they've been disturbed in some fashion or another. And most of the areas look like they're connected via some kind of trail system. Now, do those go back to the Comanche days? Who knows? This is 1937, and again, Defeat Hollow was probably circa 1870. So it's conceivable that some of these may have been or from that period. So this all, one thing I mentioned in the write-up I did, I'm going to make the speculation that basically today's Comanche Road, the road that we call Comanche Trail, was basically just a side road off of the main road, which was the old Burnett Road leading from Hamilton Valley into Austin, entering through Mount Bunnell. So if you're a traveler down this road, at some point you decide, okay, I'm gonna go to the top, camp for a while, keep an eye on traffic up and down the river. So I think Comanche Trail today is just a side road off of the bigger trail. So the next thing I want to do is turn attention to south of Comanche Peak and look at the 1964 historic aerial. So again, before this was Steiner Ranch or River Place, a lot of this property down here was associated with the Preece family, starting with Richard Lincoln Preece, who was a Texas Ranger. And I'll give you a pointer to that in a second. Anyway, we're gonna take a look at this area. Before I do that, though, so if you go back to, you can pull the 1896 Austin Quadrangle, probably one of the first topographic maps that the USGS did, and we see we've got roads here south of here. You notice Comanche Peak is not called out on here, nor is Comanche Trail. That's another discussion. It first shows up in 1930, and I'm going to write on that later. When you pull the georeference maps from USGS, and I think this one is one of the it's not manually georeferenced. I think I pulled it. It's really hard to match up. If you get one spot that's georeferenced, it's likely to have other spots. So you kind of have to go back and forth between aerial photographs, say of 1964, and using what you know from 1896 to try to assemble a path. And what we're going to do here then is I want to focus on the path and kind of the lay of the land going from Comanche Peak down to Santa Monica Springs. Okay, so here I've pulled off the old 1896 map, and I'm turning on what things look like in 1964. So again, we have Comanche Peak up there, and we have Santa Monica Springs down here. To help also get your bearings, I'm going to put 4 points up here. You can see that even in 1964, you can make out, not as well as you could in the 1937, but you can see the old road that goes like this before they straightened out 620. This bypassing 4 points, connecting up directly with today's 2222 or the old Burnett Road. So here I've turned those points on. So again, old Comanche Trail as it traced out on 1937. You can see there's a nice segue over to this section of the road here. And then I'm off a little bit here. This is from the 1937. And then making the connection over here to old Burnett Road. If you want to learn a little bit more about, there's a classic photo of Santa Monica Springs. I put a link here. If you click on that, it'll take you over to the portal of Texas history, and there is a photo of what Santa Monica Springs looked like it's dated 1890. So there's various stories about Santa Monica Springs. If you go back and look through the newspaper articles, there was speculation that the Spanish, Coronado came through here, all kind of mysterious Spanish things. With respect to Comanches, the anthropologist Daniel J. Lowe says that it was a Comanche campground, Tonkawa. The same comments made in Gunnar Brune's Springs of Texas. It's all underwater now, so this is pre 1890, before it was inundated by the lake, the first or the second. But it's also a ford in the river. So across from Santa Monica Springs today is the Commons Ford Ranch Park. The Commons, as it turns out, is a corruption of the original ranch owner. The land patent was a P.H. Cammons, a C-A-M-M-A-N-S. And as you look at the old maps over time, the GLO maps, the first one, one of the A's gets substituted for an O, and then the next one, the second A gets substituted for an O. So anyway, it was the P.H. Cammons. But it was a ford, and there was a Cameron ferry down in this area too that shows up on the 1896 maps. So here I'm bringing up the 1896 map, and so again, this has got Santa Monica Springs underwater, which it is, and although this section of the map may not be correctly georeferenced with Google Earth. But you see, there was a Cameron ferry over here. It looks like they got a little ferry boat crossing right in here. So what we're going to be looking at is the trail from getting from Comanche Peak down here. Another spot I learned about from Anthony Whitt, and hi Anthony if you're watching this, is a place called Scott's Tower. And I went back and looked through newspaper. There's various newspaper articles in reference to Scott's Tower, but it would appear to have, it was built by a Republic era or pre-Civil War Texas Ranger. And Anthony has heard, I think, that the intent was, and you'll see it'll make sense here in a minute, to be a way to watch over Indian traffic up and down the Colorado, and probably even the trail coming down from Comanche Peak to Santa Monica Springs. So taking, and I'm going to do that right now. So if we take, again, the 1896, see what roads are there. Let's try that again. Just kind of mentally, and it's hard to get an exact fit on these things, but taking what we know from 1896 and then and look at what roads are, say, in 64, we can pretty well put together a path down to Santa Monica Springs. So again, coming off of Comanche Comanche Trail up here, or anywhere in this area. You've got this. So what we have basically is, so coming down this way, and then some path between here and there, which I haven't been able to figure out. I mean, you can look at today's roads and kind of make a guess. But the main thing being, as we'll see here in a second, this is called Panther Hollow. This is a gorgeous area. It's a hike. It's a hiking trail, green belt area now. Gorgeous area, springs up and down this. And the Preece, based on things that Anthony has told me, and looking at, which we'll do here in a second, looking at property lines of the Preece family, the Preece cabin was probably right in here. Okay, so, and if you've ever driven out in this area, you can actually today, so the key thing being here, if I can get this to tilt, that it kind of came down off the highlands and dropped down like this. And you can see in 1964 there are actually there are buildings down in here. This may or may not be, and there's a building in here and a building in here. So this was an occupied area. And from what Anthony has said, the cabin, well, let me go ahead and turn this on. What I've done here is turned on the property lines. So this was the first piece of property. This was the one that Richard Lincoln Preece bought, patented this piece of land in 1859. So this is pre-Civil War, and certainly at a time when there would have been traffic up and down the Comanche Trail. There's a write-up on Dick Preece here, and if you want to click on that, it'll take you to my blog. There were several articles that Harold Preece, there's Santa Monica Springs. There were several articles that Harold Preece, his grandson, wrote for Real West magazine, and another one for Texas Ranger magazine. So again, if you want to go look at those. But again, so here's the GLO property boundaries approximately, and you see Santa Monica Springs sits on his property down here. Then there's a couple others. So his brother, also a Texas Ranger, William Martin Preece Jr., bought two properties. I don't remember if he patented them or not. Anyway, he acquired, these properties were acquired in 1869. So after the Civil War. So when you hear about the Preece Ranch, this, I'm not really, I don't think they ever owned this in a time frame of interest. But this was probably what, when you think of the Preece Ranch from the cowboy days, Chisholm Trail days, Comanche Trail days, this would have probably been the ranch. And again, there's more, there's a fairly detailed write-up here. If pulling off the 1964 overlay, here's what it looks like today. So Anthony's told me that he remembers visiting a cabin that was by where the spring is, or the little pond is today, down here in Panther Hollow. And Anthony can correct me, but I think he said he remembers a cabin here. It wasn't necessarily associated with the Preece family, but he was told that it was located where the Preece cabin was. So again, looking at 64, we can see there are other people. This may have been the one, in fact, that Anthony saw. So there's buildings in here, there's buildings down. It's a gorgeous area down here. So if you ever visit down in there, you can actually drive. So the route out to Santa Monica Springs, you can actually, so the road actually comes down just like it shows in the 1896. So the 1896 survey shows this road. The 1964 aerial still has it. It drops in just kind of like this. And you see there are traces of this road even to this day that you could drive. I don't think you can get back up in there. I think it's blocked off. But springs up and down this area. It's a gorgeous area. And you can actually drive the length of this up to this point, and then Santa Monica Springs is a little bit further down on his property and across from the Commons Ranch Ford Park. I have on my list to acquire the 1937, hopefully they have a 1937 aerial photograph of Santa Monica Springs. I'm interested to see what it looked like before it was submerged. So it's actually underwater here. It's interesting when you zoom in on Google Earth imagery today, you can actually, there's all kind of interesting things buried kind of subsurface in here. So anyway, back to Scott's Tower. When you look at it in the context of where the Preece Ranch and Santa Monica Springs, which was a Ford campground for the Comanches and Tonkawa, and a high spot here, it's a high spot. You can see why it would make sense to be an observation point for keeping an eye on things. And here again, we have the trail coming in. Back here in the distance, you can see Comanche Peak. This is the old Comanche Trail as shown in 1937, connecting up, branching here either to go over to Burnett Road or starting to come down into here. Now, there are some maps I have seen, GLO maps, kind of interesting, where some of these old maps, some people will actually hand draw and they'll pencil in roads and make annotations. There's one I've seen that actually, and you see the road runs down here today, and that's on the 1896 map. There was a GLO map that showed actually a road crossing here, and running down to, there was a community called Flint Rock Hill. This is from memory here. And Flint Rock Hill is, of course, over by Lakeway, by Chalk Knob and Flint Knob, both of which are prehistoric flint quarry sites. And Flint Rock Hill was probably a quarry site too. So I think there was probably a crossing down in here somewhere. I don't know how it crossing up like this or something like that. On the other side of Santa Monica Springs, again on the 1896 maps, there's a road that shows going down. This is BK Road. So if again, Gunnar Brun associates Barton Springs as being, well, a campsite for everybody. Comanches, Apaches, Tonkawa, Barton Springs. Everybody wants to go to Barton Springs. So from Comanche Peak, a trail would have been, of course, to come here, cross over. Once you're on Bee Cave Road, you go into Barton Springs, or you go west to various points. Chalk Knob, Flint Knob. You keep going, you're going to wind up in Fredericksburg, and then you got the Pinta Trail going north. As with all history things, you're always running into bunny trails. So one of the things we ran across, Lanny actually found both of these, there was an article about a 1914 picnic that was held in the Preece pasture, and one of the references telling people how to get out there was Nichols School. So we actually found Nichols School in the Defender, and if you want to see, here's out of the 1936 Defender. So it was he basically Sam Nichols donated an acre of land, and in some of the there's a lot of articles out there about Nichols School. It got started as a you notice there's a reference to Oak Grove. The first trustees are Dick Preece, and this will be Dick Preece. This is Richard Lincoln Preece Jr., which is the son of Dick Preece. Now, this chunk of land right here is Richard Lincoln Preece Jr.'s patent of land. This, I believe, is his house. And I've actually, I drove out on exploring some of the place names in this 1914 article. I drove out looking for, there's a place called Lake Elm that's referenced in the article. Have yet to find Lake Elm. That's a mystery. Anyway, in the process, I drove out to there's a place there. The road is out here. The place burned down. I've drawn a blank on what year, but in the last 10, 15, 20 years, the property burned down. There's bits of it still out there. I left word with some folks I stopped to visit back up in here, and they were going to pass along my information. I haven't heard back from the guy. But anyway, this is the Richard Lincoln Preece Jr. patent. This is the Sam Nichols patent. It's across from what's 3M today, and the school was still here in the school building in 1964. And in fact, even after the school closed, in articles like in 1959, they're still using the building as a meeting place for voter sign up and stuff like that. Now, one of the more interesting bunny trails, and again, I had heard reading. So Dick Preece's grandson Harold Preece wrote several of the Real West and Texas Ranger articles. But Louise, and I'm working from memory here, Louise Preece was a granddaughter, the sister of Harold Preece, and she wrote a good bit about family history in the Preece Cemetery, which is out on 2222 further down. One of the references she makes in writing about the Preece Cemetery is she says, "Oh, and by the way, somebody found an Indian burial, not on the cemetery property, but elsewhere." So that was pretty intriguing. And then Lanny found an article from 1932. And again, if you click here, okay, so this is 1932 in the Austin Statesman. And it talks about an Indian skeleton found in a cave. And it's an interview. So Richard Lincoln Preece Jr., and he also goes by Bird. So it's Richard Lincoln Bird Preece. And in fact, if you go back and look at the, well, I don't have a photo of it here, but if you hear Bird Preece, that's Richard Lincoln Bird Preece Jr. He's the one, he reported, he actually called in some folks from the university, a couple of students. They've got here Department of Anthropology, who visited the cave on his property. Oh, and then the reference again, as it ties into the Comanche Trail, is various stories from the Preece family, starting with Dick Preece himself, elaborate on the Comanche Trail. So it says here, it's also of interest that the cave is located on the old Comanche Trail, which runs through the backyard adjoining the house of Mr. Preece. This is said to have been the trail, the chief trail from which the Indians made their large raids on Austin. Although a number of mounds are located near the trail, only a few relics have been found. And then it says, basically, you're not allowed on the property. Good. So, trying to, in the article on the interest in the 1914 article was the fact that it said, oh, and by Lake Elm, which we have no clue where Lake Elm is, was on the Comanche Trail. So at the time, I thought, well, surely it's got to be in here somewhere because this is the RL, this is the patent that he did. But later I stumbled on that Richard Lincoln Preece Sr., Dick Preece, the Texas Ranger, in about 1874, it looked like the proceedings started in 1874. He bought a chunk of land up in this area. Now, 74, I'm trying to remember when the Chisholm Trail cut out. Anyway, the Preece family on the Preece Ranch, him and William, were supplying Mustangs for the Chisholm Trail. So they were probably using Ranch to Market 620, which is basically across the Jollyville Plateau. If they were headed if you follow RM 620, it'll take you right to the rock. In rereading the article about the Indian burial site, it mentions his property on the Marble Falls Road. Well, this is the 2222 up to 4 Points this is the old Burnick Road, but it says it was on the Marble Falls Road. Well, coincidentally, if you look at, so when Dick Preece died, and I haven't confirmed this, but I'm assuming that they probably retained ownership of this piece of land. It butts right up next to his son's property. So when he talks about the Marble Falls Road is 620 going to the west. So indeed, his property does butt right up to 620, the Marble Falls Road, as it would have been called. Now, you wouldn't know that if you were going by the fact that looking here, because the property don't go over that far. But in the old days, it did indeed cut right across here. So in 1934, the road may have this road, based on what it looks like in 1937, it looked like it was still in good condition. So presumably, somewhere in here was the cave where they found the Indian burial. Okay, that's it.